All right, so with my webcam mic, welcome everyone to my lovely LCS career stream. Now, for anyone that does not know how I even originated in this space, I chose the name Loyota the Dragon. That is the name I fell on. It was because my favorite UFC fighter was Lyoto Machida. Spelled a little bit different, but his nickname was the Dragon. And so that's why I literally chose it. That's just how I came up with it. Um, and I just ran with it. Now, keep in mind, obviously, the dragon part sounds pretty stupid. The further you get into the career here, to be honest, it sounds pretty bad. So I did eventually change it, like remove it. And then suddenly there was a resurgence with the dragon emoji and the fire emoji randomly during, I think it was like 2022 Academy or something like that. And I was like, you know what? It wasn't so bad. So, and then of course the Toyota symbol, Toyota. That's something my friend Ragnar came up with, and I was close to getting the Toyota sponsorship. I was close. It would have been cool to have it. Wasn't Immortals having it at one point? So that would have been kind of cool, but I was not on that team at the time. So where did this all begin? It just started from, well, my choice after graduating college. I got my 4-year degree. I was a high school math teacher with a specialization in middle school, or you want to say like a additional license to teach in middle school, right? Um, and I did student teaching, and it sucked. It literally sucked. The guy I had, the teacher who was supposed to help me out, who I took over his classes, it was his last year to teach math, and then the next year, for whatever reason, he had in his contract that his last year teaching at the school would be done teaching gym, which was like, okay, interesting. So it was his last year for teaching, and so we didn't see eye to eye on things. Like I literally went into, ooh, yeah, you're getting a BMW ad, dude. I guess I have ads on. That's a kind of unfortunate, but I'll. I guess I can't really change it right now because I'm kind of in the middle at this point. But we'll just go through this. So for what happened, so yeah, he didn't do anything, and he taught me to like yell at the students or to be like louder to them to get their attention and things like that. Keep in mind, I didn't start off like that. Like I was kind of more just trying to be friendly and like get the students to like respect me that way. And then I made a switch because like that's like how he felt like I should be doing it. And it completely screwed over the entire classroom because if you know anything about people like switching their personalities, it's pretty jarring and it can kind of lose you if that happens. And yeah, that was a pretty terrible experience. So I hated that. At this point I was Diamond 1. It was before Masters came out, and so that was actually a pretty good rank. I got to see pro players now and then when I was playing. And I actually tried to become a pro player. Actually, at first, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be a pro player, man. I'm D1. I bet I could do it. I was only like 19, 20 or something like that. I was like, sure, why not? I lost like 18 games in a row. Like something like that. I lost so many games in a row the second I tried to like change the way I viewed the game towards just climbing. And I instantly said, fuck it, I'm not doing that idea. I'm not gonna try to go pro that way. I could go pro from by a staff side, but definitely not by a player side. And of course, naturally, I love watching esports. That's when we had all the amazing teams like TSM and CLG, like who played like high level games, high stake games in those like third party tournaments. So that was really fun. That was really fun to watch, and that really got me into it. So I started with Gold Pretend, which was just this really random like just like non-profit website created by Ryan Tang to just, I don't know, just help people post articles about esports, anything you can think of. And I don't know, I just took a chance at it. And so I asked him, could I just like write some stuff for you? And he said, yeah. And naturally it's like for free, right? So I'm like, why not? And I chose very specific things like tracking teleport usage, tracking gank usage, um, trying to come up with ways to. It's not just like, oh, like he used TP at 10 minutes. It's like, why did he use it? How did he use it? And then where does like how does that add up with everything? And then trying to do that with various like aspects of the game. Basically things that people weren't really doing at the time, and it got attention. And remember doing one on a Chinese player. I can't remember who. I feel like it was a Chinese jungler, but I can't really remember who. And then Kelsey retweeted it, and that actually helped like create momentum for me because I was a nobody. I was an absolute nobody. Uh, and LPL wasn't even that big at that time. I mean, like it was not like how it is now, where like you have I Will Dominate, Casual, like whoever like chooses like an LPL team and they kind of like sponsor them as their fan favorite, and that becomes a really big pull towards LPL. Not so much at that point. So yeah, she retweeted it, and that was a huge help to me. And I remember talking to her even during then, and it was really really nice. Like naturally, you have to have some luck to make it. I mean, that's just how it is. Especially when there's not like a ton of jobs or anything like that. You just need some luck, something that actually will pull someone, and this worked. So that was gold per 10. There was actually a lot of people that were pretty smart actually and ended up getting into esports that worked through this site too, which is again kind of funny. It was like almost like a little like nest of talent growing in a way. So for that, honestly, that's why I said like Kelsey and Ryan, like huge help at that time. This led me to volunteering for Origin, Origen, however you want to say it. And I basically got selected from this because Hermit, who was like, I don't know exactly what he was for that team. In the end of the day, I think he was like he said he was their coach. Some people said otherwise, but regardless, like he chose like 7 to 8 people to join that team and to help them out. As is, of course, volunteer work, not getting paid for this or anything like that. And this is for when they were going to Worlds, and that team was super good. That team was really, really good. And a lot of people did different work. Nothing was really structured, concrete. I don't even know if anyone really knew like what was like best to give or like do in the end either. And I'm gonna be honest, during this time, initially, like coming from this, I was like, I don't know how much help I did, but it was still like a fun experience to see what other people did and like just like watching scrims from them and stuff like that. And it did help me like get options to again my name get out there and like possibly get a trial or interview or whatever. But I'll be honest, I didn't, dude. I swear to God, like I don't think I really had that much impact. Like, like I'll be honest, like this is the number one thing I'm gonna do in this stream, guys. When talking about my career, what's up, Brandini? Is just being honest about how much I felt like I actually contribute to things, and like I think a lot of people overblow what they've done, and I think for me, honestly, I don't think I had that huge of an impact. I mean, like naturally, like I said, it's not very well structured, and I have no idea how much impact the work I did even had in the first place. And this is why I also don't really mention like initially in my initial years I mentioned it a little bit, but after a couple of years I started thinking, why am I mentioning this? This is just kind of like this is kind of like bad if I mention it. Like I don't actually want people to think like I was a really big part of this like run because I wasn't. um, but it worked. It definitely it definitely helped. It definitely helped a little bit, and this led to literally me getting a interview and a trial for Immortals. Now, Immortals, 2016 Immortals specifically, holy shit, was that team good. And I didn't know what the roster was at all. No idea who the roster was. I was just trying to land a job, right? Didn't really matter who it was. I just wanted to land a job. I know that some guys from the Origin squad who volunteered ended up going to Energy, which is cool. For me, I was not really taken on to that part, as far as I know. At least I never had like anything like mentioned to me about it or anything like that, so I didn't really consider that an option. But Immortals, it was Dylan Falco chosen as the head coach. He was former TSM, and he decided to leave the org to join Immortals to become their head coach, which is obviously a great idea by him. And the trial process was basically there was the interview, and then there was the trial to ask to explain lane swaps. Now, lane swaps back then were pretty complex. Like they, I mean, if anyone remembers how they worked, you know, in our current stage, pretty much you have your dual lane swap up, you hit the turret, you try to zone the enemy jungler, which was a thing back then, and you can't really take the full turret ever. Like you'll get a little bit of like maybe you'll get a couple plates, you deny some farm, and then you kind of try to figure out how to best get your top laner experience, and then you just swap back into other situations, right? During then, this was when you had like you would take a turret, they would take a turret. You swap back, they take a turret, you take a turret. So both side turrets would be deleted. And then that's when like a little more chaos would like kind of ensue with like whatever what may happen. And there was like a little bit deeper strategies towards why you would do things. And the average person that I was told at the time did a 10-minute video. I was the last person to submit. I sent a 45-minute video. I sent a large ass like in-depth video on lane swaps, and I thought to myself, I'm not gonna make it, man. I'm probably just rambling. Like, what am I doing? I was so nervous. I was like, dude, like this is never gonna work. It worked. He was like, dude, this is great. Like, you actually covered everything in this. Now, keep in mind, it probably should not take 45 minutes to do that, but you you know, in the end of the day, like I was just trying my best, and so I landed it. Now, apparently, I had an option with TSM back then too, but I'm so happy that like I ended up with Immortals. That was definitely a better choice for me. And yeah, that's how I got on there. That's all it took was just some luck in the beginning to kind of get my name out there, and then just nail a trial when you actually get that chance. That's it. Now, this roster, like I said, these guys were absolute killers. You know, just look at their spring record, 17-1. Like, holy shit. That's good. That's really good. And this is my first time as a full-time analyst. I wasn't like I never had to do prep for teams before. I did release some stuff like this, but like I said, I never had to go really too in depth on it. And so I created my scouting presentations. It was definitely more data centric compared to how I do it now, where I do combine both a lot better, and there's definitely a lot more useful game notes, you could say, like in my current work compared to back then. The lane swap tracking, like I mentioned before, that was actually very detailed and actually very, I would say, tiresome in a way. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just you have so many different fields to signify a change in direction, and to line that all up and look at all of it. Yeah, it was pretty in depth in the end of the day. But a lot of this work was through Google Sheets, like Excel. Like that's how it was back then. Like people did a ton of stuff through Excel. This is where you had to do a lot of data inputting, like inputting the full drafts, you know, messing with formulas to kind of, how would I say it, offset it the way you want to so you can display it better in pivot tables and whatever. And yeah, that was kind of the job. Like, to be honest, when I think back about what I added to scrims, like was I really that useful on a specific level where like the players were benefiting a lot from game knowledge I was giving? Honestly, probably not that much. No, like when I really think about it, keep in mind these are like big time players. Like these are like Huni Reino were coming off from like their Worlds run. You had Pobelter, Wild Turtle. Wild Turtle was a goddamn player that I was like so excited to see just the idea of it. Like I watched him on TSM and now I'm gonna like work with him. Like that's amazing. And I think part of that is just being young and just like I said, just not nearly confident enough on kind of matching and talking to some of these guys because of how good they were then and like the pedigree they kind of had as well. That like this is my first year team. Like I don't think I should be really saying too much though. Is this a reflection or are you leaving LCS? I'm reflecting over it. Honestly, I really wanted to just do a video to just talk about what it really was like to just go through LCS, LoL esports, and anyone that's actually interested in what this stuff was, how it's evolved, and what to watch out for, that's kind of like what this is for. Um, so yeah, this, like I said, I honestly, in the end of the day, I really didn't think this was. I really think I could have done so much more if I was just more of a student. If I really just accepted the weakness that I had, and I was very willing to just kind of dig in more to like how I did my lane swap video, like dig in way more and just try to work on that weakness. That's how I felt at that time. When I think back on it. And it partly stems from the fact that, like, if you're the type of student like going to the classes, like when I think about how I was in high school, I didn't raise my hand. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to participate. I didn't want to do any of that. I didn't want to ask questions. And when I think about how I was in college, it was the exact opposite. Like, I actually was more interested in like talking and like participating because like this is my future. This actually matters. And I wish I did that more. But like I said, I think this team was really fun because they were so good. They had really good vibes. I remember like they would crush scrims and they would have like 5 minute reviews and then they would just go off and have fun. Like like that, like honestly, like these guys were just so good that it's kind of passed by. And you know, I wish I took a little bit more advantage of the situation in the end of the day. I think from just talking about the roster itself, I think when I look back to working with Dylan Falco, because now he's on G2, right? And he's had a really impressive career so far. I mean, he did TSM, then he did Immortals, then he had one bad team, which was like Envy or something like that. Then he went on to Fnatic, and then I think it was G2 after. And one thing that instantly stuck out to me was that, and this is one thing I'll always appreciate, is someone who's willing to like publicly like praise the guys like behind him. That feels amazing, especially when like you're not really making much money. Like on my side, you don't feel like maybe you contribute enough at times, and then like he'll give you like a public praise about it, and like that's amazing. I feel like that doesn't happen nearly enough. Like so many coaches just sit back, pat themselves on the back, they'll congratulate their players and everything, but they won't actually publicly say something nice about the guys behind them, and that kind of sucks. Two, I think Dylan, the number one thing that really stood out to me about Dylan was this guy was so good about reading the meta. Like, I don't know. Like I remember in the spring, like obviously people said Adrian doesn't play melees or anything like that because we're weak laners, so we have to play Enchantress to do better. But the reality was that Enchantress were just good. Like they actually were legitimately good. And MSI that year ended up becoming a ranged support meta. And you know who was doing that the whole split? Adrian. Like honestly, I think Dylan is just good at reading the metas and predicting them. And yeah, that was really impressive. And that I love that about how he figured that out. Honestly, like I'm not surprised that G2 like can do the exact same thing. Not surprised at all. Now, going from that, and like I said, also just the fact that, how would I say it? Like the team ended up kind of crumbling towards the end because lane swaps were removed, and then we went into standard lanes only. Bot lane started kind of falling apart, so that became kind of like of an issue. And yeah, the team just couldn't finish in the end. And it is what it is, but pretty impressive for like Dylan's first year as a head coach and everything. Going from that offseason 2016 to 2017, and this is my first experience with how people see value in you. Dylan's gone. The team still wants me. We're looking for a renewal on the contract, right? Naturally, I want more money. I'm making like minimum wage. Naturally, I want more money. While talking about this subject with the CEO, I am told that 4 college students could do the work I do. 4 college students could do the work that I do. I was told that, and first I'm thinking to myself, like, did he just fucking say that to me? Like, are you telling me that you want to split one person's job into 4 people's jobs and then have that managed and structured in a way that's gonna work? That makes no sense. And like, what also made no sense is that I remember Dylan, when he left, he told me like, "Yo, I could probably help you and hook you up like with a job at TSM if you're leaving IMT." And to me, that signifies to me that like, oh, this guy does see value in me. Like he actually likes me, and I'm pretty sure he told Noah to keep me as well. But then I just get this flat out shitty comment to me, and I was just like, what on earth? Are you kidding me? And that honestly, this actually started my imposter syndrome. This actually, I actually felt so shitty. I felt like I was begging for just a small increase in pay, and that felt so shitty to me. And that was my first time experiencing, yeah, how people see value. So that felt really bad. And this definitely can happen. And if I was someone looking to get a pay raise, looking to, you know, see what a real boss is, like honestly, you need to identify what is the leader actually doing for you. Like how are they actually promoting a positive environment for you to be better and give you those chances to be better while also literally showing it with the money. And I didn't feel that at all. Horrible Pukar. That's so bad. So regardless of that, that was my first experience going into an off season. That was my first off season ever. Now we have the 2017 IMT iteration, and so the spring was really rough. This is the team that had Dardoch, and naturally, anyone that remembers Dardoch, he always was a bit emotional. He can kind of get into his own head a lot, and naturally, this kind of like makes people fight against themselves, and yeah, it just couldn't get past that. In the end, it just couldn't really get past that. Now, I will say this roster definitely had firepower. I mean, we had Flame. Cody was new, but honestly, Cody Olay by the end of the split were doing really well. Like they had Caitlyn Karma locked down. They were doing pretty damn well. Colt Belter was fine. Like he obviously can handle himself in the LCS. And Darda could have really great moments. So yeah, like the team could work. It just, you know, something was missing. And for me, this was actually a really great experience. Like obviously the team went 9-9. We did not like actually we didn't go 9-9. We went 8-10. Sorry. We went 8-10. And regardless of that, I thought it was a really great experience because for me, the big thing for me was that like we had Hermes as our coach. Hermes was chosen as the new head coach, and I felt like I had a stronger voice. Like we had opportunities to be able to draft against the team, against the players and the coach, me and Lufty. So we would work together and then we would draft against the coach. I felt like I had a little bit more pull on some things happening on the team, like ideas, strategies. And so for me, this was a positive experience. Even though it was not a great team per se for that split, this was actually a pretty positive experience. So I was pretty happy about that. Then, going in the summer, I remember that there was talks about like how we're gonna redo evaluating players and like creating a little like ideas behind it, and it sounded interesting. And then Hermes was gone, and then we added a Korean coach. And now keep in mind, he did great, but this was my first time dealing with a Korean coach. It was Kane, and I hated it. Absolutely hated it. And it's not because Kane did anything towards me or anything. It's because Kane did nothing to me. It's like, to be honest, it's because Kane did literally nothing to me. I got no feedback, none. Like I did the same work, but I heard nothing back. It was terrible. Honestly, it was probably one of the worst experiences, like working on a team. Like the team did way better, and that honestly, it is definitely because of Xmithy. Like this guy, this guy was the missing piece. He was able to just connect everyone together. He was able to fill in a lot of convoys and improve the strategy of the team. And he was just a very solid player. And that's what they needed. They just needed someone that they could lean on and give stability. So yeah, adding Xmithy was spectacular. Obviously, they got kind of like smashed in the finals. And I don't think we had a really great time at Worlds either, but it was really nice. Like the team did really nice in that sense. Work wise, hated it. Hated it. I feel like by 2017, I think if spring rolled into the same way as summer, I feel like I would have improved even more as an individual. But because of the summer, I felt like I stagnated a lot, and that was not good. Now, leaving 2017, obviously, uh they did not make franchising. So that job was gone. So now everyone on Immortals is basically looking for a job, figuring stuff out. And I don't know if this is around that time, but I remember like starting to do a bit more content again. And this is where, I got to be on a podcast. And at the time, Thorin like was like a pretty big personality for podcasts. Like they had like Summoning Insight, all that stuff. I remember being super nervous. I think I did okay in the end of the day. I wish I was more confident. And there was opportunities to do a bit more after that, but I passed on it because from the 2016-2017 off season, like I had a bit imposter syndrome starting, and it kind of crept up a little bit more because then I started thinking, do I really fit into this? Like, do I really know what I'm talking about? Do people even like what I said? And that was not great. That was not great for that to start popping up more and more. And going from that, it actually hit a down low because this is actually something I don't talk about at all. Like this is information I will only tell some people, but not a lot of people. But during that off season, I did get an interview with basically every team. I do remember interviewing with like CLG. I don't remember if I did TSM at all, but like there was a lot of teams I talked to during that off season, and I just did terrible. I bombed it. I did terrible. Like I honestly, I was just really bad at interviewing. It's a skill I never had to really work on or improve on. I was remote, so I wasn't really having to talk like one to one with people that much either. So I was not good at that aspect at all. I knew for sure if you made me do the work, if you gave me a trial, I would make it. I would be able to do it 100%. But I didn't get that because my interviews were not good. My interviews were so bad. So if you're someone who's looking to get into esports, I'll tell you right now, it's very easy to talk yourself way in many cases. Like it's happened so many times that somehow the guy named Cubs Coops was able to get hired several times from that alone. So it's doable. Just I can't do it. I can't do it. But what I ended up happening is I actually got onto Golden Guardians as an assistant coach. Like so I actually moved up the ladder going from 2017 to 2018. And the roster, obviously, as you all remember, was not great. It was not a great roster. Um, it was really not a great roster. But like I moved up the ladder, so I was thinking, okay, this is probably like pretty good for me, right? Now, when I was there, and keep in mind, I already had like the growing imposter syndrome. When I like met all the players, I was in LA for just 1 week on the same, which is funny by the way. It was actually the same team house as Immortals, so like I already been there before, so like I instantly recognized it. Hate the house, by the way, terrible rental house. But talked to the players, led some like talks at times, which like High corrected me a few times and things. And I'm like, shit, like why am I assistant coach? And if this guy can just correct me, shouldn't like High just be like the assistant coach at this point? And actually, like, of course, I'm not gonna be able to match High's like game knowledge. Like, I'm the guy who's coming off 2 seasons, and especially the summer season where I didn't have to really do as much or get involved as much, which sucked. Um, and I kind of like I started just kind of having like an anxiety attack over just is this meant for me? Am I really like am I actually like fit to do this work? And it was terrible. I remember calling my dad. I remember calling my dad and just feeling so bad talking about it. And he told me I should probably stick with it, but I didn't. I didn't. I didn't sign the contract yet with them. I literally held off signing the contract because I was so worried something bad would happen. Um, And so I left after a week. That was it. That was oh my god, that was so bad. I cannot stress how terrible it is to think about how I'm joined like the Skype chats and all the group chats for the team and everything, and then I have to leave and after just 1 week, and like if you're players and you're seeing your assistant coaches just leaving after 1 week, that's not a great side. Um, but also the vibes of the team didn't feel that great. They really didn't feel that great. Honestly, it felt like people felt already a little defeated. So all that mixed in, it just didn't seem right. And yeah, like I said, imposter syndrome. Is this really for me? That was my super short stint as an assistant coach. But luckily enough, there was a team that actually wanted me. It was TO. How lucky was that? I went from what ended up being the worst team in the league to jumping to the best team in the league. Now that's crazy. I can't tell you how lucky that is in some ways that that worked out that way, but it did. And this team brought over guys from Immortals. Maybe that's partially why they chose me, but they still had Kane. And naturally, I had worries because I'm like, oh god, is it just gonna be another year of this? Like, I need to work, I need to like make some money and stuff, but man, I'm gonna do nothing. But thank God they had George. You know, I don't know if anyone remembers this guy, but he was on Team Liquid. He was their longtime analyst, and I had to work through him, and that was awesome. That was so good for me because for me, it meant like there was actual structure. There was like two other people who were working under Jarge, and this was amazing. Like, obviously, I don't think I was exactly fit for position coaching, like mid lane. Like, I don't think I was as in depth or nearly as good enough to actually level up Pobelter the way that you probably would want to. But I did my best and like looked at ways to kind of help him get better still. And George would also give me some like work for like scouting opponents, scouting like specifically the enemy mid laner, whatever. And I felt like my work was actually useful. So I was really happy about that. I was like, man, I actually feel like I'm part of the team a little bit. This is great. And then he left because he wanted to go and become a caster in LEC. And shit. Back to darkness, guys. Back to darkness. I sent in the work. I tried to be as thorough as I could, and I heard nothing back. So, and I'm told that it was partially that way because Kane likes just doing stuff himself. You know, like that's how he likes to work. He wants to do it himself and trust what he has. And again, I don't know how much of my stuff was used, but oh, that sucked. And in the end of the day, like this roster specifically, like it was a good roster. They really couldn't get past the international pressure, right? Like, you know, Ole and Double Up were struggling. They struggled seeing things through. And even though, you know, they did dominate like the LCS playoffs, for whatever the case, whenever it came to international, things kind of just crumbled away with their like fortitude. And that sucked. Like that really sucked. Because this roster could have done so much more, but whew, couldn't get through it. And like I said, for my work, for specifically like coaching Pobelter, like Jarge had like a sheet designed for setting goals, how they meet the goals, did they meet the goals, what can they work on next, and it was not bad. Honestly, I actually didn't mind it, and I did take some inspiration from it from later on. So that at least had some decency towards like improving me in the future, I guess. Now, the only issue that occurred though, and also I'll say going back to this, when George left, I probably should have asked to move to LA because when I think about it, by not moving to LA or at least like trying to move to LA, I already knew this was always gonna be the case that I wouldn't like get a lot of like interactions with the coach and the players and whatever. If I was in LA, there's a much higher chance I could at least absorb what's going on better and improve. But if you remember, I just left LA recently because of the Golden Guardians thing, and I was worried that I might have another anxiety attack or something like that and just ruin the moment. So I remained remote. I remained remote because of that. And so that opportunity went away. And then going into the off season with TL, again, I don't know what the hell is going on. And I learned that I was getting replaced by the person who was replacing me, not my boss, the new hire, which just sounds absolutely ridiculous for that to ever happen. Like, I could not imagine the guy walking in and be like, oh, by the way, yeah, I'm replacing you. And it's just like, oh. And it was really nice. He told me too, by the way. Like, he didn't have to do that, but it was so nice that he did because the second he did, I just left. I just respectively said, I'm gonna look elsewhere. But it killed my spirit inside. Like, cause at this point I was feeling pretty low, and I was like, not and now, like I'm just like done. Like I didn't feel like I had a lot of worth at all. And of course, this is how things go with this kind of stuff. People will hold on to whoever they have, whether it's a player, a staff member, and they'll look for someone else, and then they will replace that person without them knowing. And that's just how they like to handle business, which to me is obviously I understand the idea of like you don't necessarily want this person to search if you don't land that other person. But at the same time, like it's just feel kind of blindsided, you know? Like just don't like that at all. Especially if it like at least to me, the second like the person's like chosen, I would love if like the boss or whatever who's in charge just tells me you're out. You know? Like don't delay it. Just tell me right away or else it's going to like feel really bad. So that sucked. And this started making me thinking about losing trust and wanting to stay with the team, and also just you got to look out for yourself. Like you really do. Like you can't put your faith in organizations, can't be put your faith in your boss no matter how much they like you, because at the end of the day they're going to do whatever is best for them, you know? That's just how it is. And that's just how it is in, the world outside of esports. But for me, since I only worked in esports, and no, I'm not counting like working as a lifeguard or whatever, like this being my true first full-time job, like being in esports, yeah, that was pretty bad. And then the gap year happened, and this was even worse. This was actually so bad for me because funny enough, I actually landed on Golden Guardians again. Like again, this is something I don't tell anyone, and I don't think I even put it on my resume really because it's like, what's the point of it? But I was on Golden Guardians for 1 month going into 2019, and I was removed without any reason, and I literally just accepted it without asking any reasonings on why or whatever because I was just down in the ditches mentally. I was just so done. I was so done with it, and I'm sure I could have done more while on that team for just the 1 month, but I wasn't given a lot of direction, and yeah, it just that was it. That was literally it. I made content that here and there, but honestly, I felt like I kind of just wasted that whole year. Like I barely put myself back together by 2020. Like this was some of the worst. I had some of the worst thoughts this year than I ever had in my entire life. Like when I think back to it, I had a solid week where I kept asking myself over and over again, what is the purpose of my life? Like I was asking myself that question over and over and over again because to me, I hated teaching. I hated student teaching, and I put 4 years into that. That's gone. Now I spent all this time in esports. I didn't make a ton of money, and now this is gone. And I was thinking, am I ever gonna find anything that's even remotely as fun as esports? Like, literally, I'm working in professional gaming. Like, this is amazing. Where else am I gonna find something like this? And that thought just kept creeping up in my head. I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to eat. I just sat in bed all day, all night. It was horrible. Honestly, it was actually horrible. I just felt like I don't know. It was really bad. I think the only way I ever even got out of this whole situation, this whole gap year, was because of my friends. I think that's the only way I even remotely stood a chance of getting out of this situation. Otherwise, I feel like it would just kept snowballing, and that just would have been it. So friends that I had like Pelka, Doug, Brucknar, like Vivian, Ashley, uh, Pete Stillwell, Barry, Kyle. Like I hope I'm not forgetting anyone, but you know, people like that, like just oh my god, that actually was just so important for me to get through this. And I know other people definitely get imposter syndrome in various work that they do, whether it's not esports, like just something else. Um, but like you just need the right supporting cast to really get out of that, honestly. Whether it's career wise or it's just like outside of that, like that's really what you need, you know? So now I'll say right now, guys, I am perfectly fine now. Let's say that right now. I am perfectly fine now. But during then, horrible. Absolutely horrible. I know I even wrote a piece on it because it was so bad. And I just felt like I needed to talk about it. Or else I was just, I don't know. I wasn't going to get through it. Now, this is the turn of my career. Honestly, I'm going to have a lot of nice things to say here, okay? I have a lot of nice things to say. I was given a chance with FlyQuest. I reached out to a lot of teams. Like I said, I was at my lowest. I was going to accept whatever I could get. I just wanted to get back into it because I knew if I didn't, like I said, things were just going to snowball. So I reached out to FlyQuest. Nick Fan's on the team. Nick Fan was the manager. I think he was the manager of 2017 Immortals. Um, so he did know who I was. We didn't interact a lot, but he knew who I was. And he gave me a trial. Thank God he gave me a trial. And I got it. And it was for working for the Academy squad. But like Nick gave me that option because he said, let's do a trial. He liked the trial. And he said, let's get you some work. That was a huge thing for me. Seriously. I don't know what to say. It was such a big deal for me. Oh, it actually kind of turned my life around a little bit. So thank God for that, right? Whew, get a little emotional just thinking about it. Damn. Whew. So that first year, it was working with Cop. Now, obviously it's Cop from like the ADC player, right? And this was not bad. You know, I got to work one on one with a lot of people, with the players and with Cop, and we did one on ones together. You know, I had more direct conversations with players. You know, I got to give out more ideas. It was really fun. Honestly, it was really fun working with these guys. And it felt less pressure than LCS. And I felt like it was somewhere where I could really grow into doing stuff that I liked. Because, you know, as much shit as I'd say about how teaching was, I didn't like teaching, I do actually like helping people. And I felt like I was actually helping people in better ways in Academy than LCS. So yeah, I definitely realized at that moment I want to work in the development. Like I want to work with development players. And this squad, you know, we picked up Triple, we had Mo, we had Fan, Mash, JJ. It was a fun squad. You know, it was a, you know, there's some language that's used that's not probably the best. I would say that Fan and Triple had an interesting relationship together. Probably not the most productive relationship at times or improving each other, but you know, it was still fun. And I think if you're trying to get into esports, specifically like analytics, coaching, it's like you don't have to nail making LEC, LCS like right away. Like working with in these development leagues is such a great way to both figure out what your style is. It helps you learn a lot because like in the end of the day, you got to learn from the beginning, right? Like you don't usually just jump straight to LCS. And yeah, this was just really great confidence boost. And we go into 2021 and 2022. You guys can't see this, but it's NXI and Diamond and Tomo. That's in the top right. But this squad, you know, this squad to me, this was really fun. This was because this was like kind of the last years that I worked in Academy, like directly with players. Nick Fan is the GOAT. working with players, and I threw in Philip here and Dreams because there was no like, at least I couldn't find online like any like big announcements saying like Philip on Academy or like Dreams like in LCS whatever. So I threw their pictures in here. I got to work two coaches here, Richard and Soul Strikes. Now, getting to work with Richard for the first year, that was really fun. Richard is a very smart individual about the game. Uh, he was definitely learning how to be a head coach, right? I think he was coming off from being a player. I can't remember if he actually coached before this or not, but uh, it was again fall similarly to how working with Cop was, where you know I got to have a bigger voice on what was going on, and I felt more comfortable working with the players, especially because we had triple comeback. We had, I think it was actually only triple that came back. Yeah, I think it was only triple. Um, but again, working individually with the players, giving feedback, how they can do better in lane at times. I remember I was doing that a lot with top lane, but that was, I think it was the previous year that I was doing that more with top lane, and like I said, it was fun. It was just generally really fun. And with Soul Strikes, again, same case. Um, and also, these were times where I actually got to fly out to LA for like a solid month, maybe 2 weeks to a month, to also work on the academy roster for playoffs. Again, really fun. And under the table coaching, okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember. I really couldn't remember because it's been so long now. But I think again, if you're an analyst, if you're working remote, like you want to be able to have a coach that you're working with who lets you actually like try things. Because if you don't get to do that, I feel like you just have no room to grow at all. And like it just feels pretty bad. Like I know some coaches just want to hammer in like what they want from you and that's it. That's fine, but it kind of limits your creativity, your growth, trying like I said, trying new things, and overall that just sucks, right? And also around this time is when I was getting more into fitness. Uh, I met my future wife during this time as well, and I had a lot of confidence instilled in me at this point. Like I was getting definitely way more confident in myself. So that reflected in my work and my approach towards the organization because the organization also showed love to me by well paying me more, right? I mean, I actually felt reasonably paid at this point going into these years, and I was that really does a huge thing for an individual. Like you actually feel like your worth is shown, right? And yeah, I was this was great. Like I mean, yeah, like I said, working with these guys was super fun. I think for this roster, like again, I think Triple and his relationship with his jungler was a little iffy, to be honest. Like it might be not the best relationship in the end of the day, and people definitely got a little too emotional for how things went, and I don't think we really did the best for solving those situations. And of course, during this time, this is also when players also just promoted. Like, there was a time where like Kumo promoted to LCS, then Philip promoted to LCS, Dreams and like Diamond switching back and forth. I think they tried Tomo in LCS even briefly. Like they threw the whole academy squad in LCS for a little bit, and they actually won what like 3 games in a row or something like that. And then oh, I think it was a super week, right? It was a super week where they won 3 games, that all 3 games, and everyone was like, "Holy shit, it works! I can't believe it, it works!" And I thought to myself when I watched those games, because I remember them, I was like, "How the hell did we win these games? Like, how did we win these? I don't like." If you look at the issues that were popping up in those games, I didn't have trust that that was actually going to be able to like last the whole season, and naturally, it did not. Unfortunately, it did not. And they started losing, and then they reintroduced the LCS guys again. But when you do those kinds of things, like it's a huge gamble because if it doesn't work, like if that doesn't work, oof, you lose a lot of trust in players, confidence drops in players. Like it's a big gamble. It's a big gamble. So, uh, yeah, stuff like that happened during that time. But it was fun. I mean, it was definitely fun. Yeah, 2021 C9 spot, dude. I can't believe that stuff happened. It just it's just unreal that that stuff happened. Um, when I think back to these guys, I loved working with like almost everyone, honestly, from these squads. Like, yeah, I definitely liked working with a lot of them. Again, there was some interesting language being thrown around to how people like talk about game strategies and stuff, which I never really cared for, to be honest. It was definitely like I thought it could be. It was funny at times, but also just like, man, like these guys need to do something else besides this. Um, and when I think like these, I don't think we ever won NACL. We never. I don't think we even went to the finals once, even though there was like very solid squads. And again, I think that's just because like people were too emotionally charged. Again, I think like a lot of the roster swaps were not really in favor of the academy team. Like it was definitely more in favor for the LCS team. And for me, I when I look at it, I wish I gave info in a simpler way. I think this is the number one thing that everyone makes a mistake on as like an analyst, as a coach, whatever. Like you just need to give info in a direct way that like doesn't require a billion words to get through it because players just don't have the attention span for it. And once you lose them, that's it. Like that's literally it. You won't get them again. And I wish I watched more games. Like I said, way back in 2016, I said I wish I was more of a student on the game, and I do wish I was a little bit more of a student at times, even during these years. But sometimes like just like with how much work there is, and then sometimes just priorities on balancing life, like it just doesn't line up. But like I said, I wish I did that more because I think I could have helped certain players more, especially players who weren't getting as much help during that time because my job was very much like in the old school ways of how an analyst was. Like, if you think about analysts now, they're much more aligned towards being data analysts, right? Like, they handle the data, they'll get you all your information from the grid, from Bayes, which, I mean, that was not a thing back then, but from grid, from Bayes, from using the API, which I did do at a certain point. I did use the API, I did have sheets like set up for tracking solo queue and then tracking like competitive picks and that kind of stuff. And while that was like fine, I always just preferred like the strategy side. Like the strategy side was always a lot more interesting. So I kind of dabbled in both. And that's like kind of more the old school way analysts of doing things. Like you can handle some of the strategy side and you can also handle some of the data side. And you know, if you don't choose one or the other, like for instance, I feel like if you're a data analyst, like you just need to focus on that. Because I feel like that's just a way better path towards just being better. Same with like, the strategy side. I think you just focus on the strategy side, and that's a way better pathway of being better. I think trying to split the two muddies things up. So if you're thinking about like looking at these two ideas, yeah, it's pretty much you're either a coach or you're a data analyst in this day and age. But for me and how I am now, I'm like a little of both still. A lot less data though. Way less data than I was doing before because I did not care for like data tracking as much as other people like it. And going into this, from working as that kind of, like I said, like game analyst slash data analyst a little bit, I was promoted to head of scouting for 2022 and 2023. The title was more official in 2023, but 2022, I was technically getting the salary of a head of scouting while also doing the role of some of the head of scouting plus the other. Yeah, I chose this picture, man, because you know, like I said, during these years, these were some of my favorite years of working in LCS for an LCS org and everything. Like seriously, like I love the vibe of the fans. I love the podcast. I just really liked being part of the organization of FlyQuest. I really did. Like I just dabbled in everything I could, which was way different compared to how I was in other teams. Like for FlyQuest, I would help, and this was in later years. Like especially 2023, this being the case in the off season between 2022 and 2023, I would help lead like interviews. I would be the recorder for interviews for certain like LCS interviews, whether it's like for like Korean players or whatever. I led trials, like scheduling, leading them, picking the players, setting the rosters, like, and I'm gonna tell you right now, that's just just thinking about just getting 40 teenagers, like 20-year-olds, getting like set up. Oh my god, it's actually a nightmare. It's actually so much harder than I thought it could possibly be, but it was just me manning that. And the fact that I felt like my trials went as well as they did, and like we're pretty much on time usually and everything, pretty good. Meeting Julius. Yo, I mean, I actually could have. Well, I mean, like, cause I looked on Google, right? Like, I made it today, and there are definitely pictures of us meeting and like other people meeting, which, again, that was great. But that was at LCS, right? Like LCS finals, in Chicago. But so yeah, for like the stuff I dabbled in, like I gave feedback to coaches, I gave feedback to players. I talked to Nick all the time about like just things on top of my head. It was really great. I felt like I had a lot of power in the organization for like helping drive it forward. So I was super happy being on this team. But now let's actually talk about head of scouting. So I started running trials back in 2022 fall. This one, I will say I had help from Richard more so, because he helped help find some top prospects. I remember the first time I watched Spyrax was actually at the MU LAN. That was pretty fun going to that like event overall. But like I saw Spyrax there he played a Rise game, and some of the shit he did in that game, I was like, oh my god, this guy's pretty damn good. And then I kind of forgot about him. I'll be honest. I actually kind of forgot about him after that moment. And then I remember Richard bringing him up, like when I'm looking at the list, and he's just like, I was like, oh shit, yeah, dude, we definitely need to invite that guy. And then we invited UG2, both really impressed, and we picked them up. And honestly, I'm so glad we picked them up. I mean, those were two hella good players. And if you look at where they are now, they're still doing really, really well. So that first trial I led, awesome. Found two fantastic players. Okay, then we did a spring combine. It was like just finding random people, uh, like masters tier, like not really like high tier players or anything like that. Just want to gauge what's out there, and that was fun. I probably could have made better use of it when I look at it, because when you like try to create these schedulings, so the first thing is obviously you need to choose how many players you want to even have, how many lobbies you want to lead. So you have to have one of each player, right, in those like slots. But then also like, you need to know what dates they can play. So you need to choose a date ahead of time, see who can match in what dates, and then fill in the void for whatever can't be happening. So now you have to go from like a 40 player list to now maybe it's like a 48 player list. And then maybe someone misses it. Someone's like, oh, I gotta be somewhere else. And so now you have to dig for someone else. Maybe you dig for someone that wasn't on that day and to fill them in. Maybe they can't do it. It's just, oh, there's just so many issues I had to deal with when it came to running trials that were just horrible, horrible. But it was fun. It was still fun doing those. And I would say all my experiences leading up from 2022 fall and then doing the spring combine in 2022 led to the success of the 2023 fall trials. Because with those, and I remember this, I planned the dates like well ahead of time of any other LCS team. And I know that for sure because everyone literally created their trials around my trial. Like the second I chose my dates, that's when you started having teams choosing dates before mine and then after mine. And then I also know I had the list of players well ahead of time made as well. And of course, naturally, it gets leaked out, so people will choose players that you have on there, and be like, "Oh, actually, I didn't think of that guy." And of course, naturally, for me, that feels great. And also, I will say though, when I see like leaked trial lists, of course, I'm also interested because maybe I missed someone. And so, this is how it goes, like with these kinds of things. Players are just gonna talk. They're just gonna talk. It's gonna get out there. It is what it is. There's nothing really secretive about it in the end of the day. So it's just one of those things that you kind of learn while doing the work that like, yeah, you could be one of those teams that like kind of waits a long time, like, oh, I'm just gonna wait till like 4 LCS teams create their list of players for their trials. It's going to get leaked. Then I'm going to look at the list and I'm going to choose the same players. And then I'm just going to run my trial based on that. And there are teams that who literally do that. It's a lazy way to do it, but that's how they do it. For me, I like getting stuff done way ahead of time. I don't like waiting. I don't like depending on what other people are doing. I want to set my schedule to what I want to do. And that's how I did this. And I remember like just whew, I got a lot of great players. I felt like going into those trials, and one of them so happened to be Masu. I still can't believe it. Black Masu. That's what he was called back then. I don't think he was even gaining as much attention compared to other players, to be honest. And he just killed it. He killed our trials. Like no matter who he played with, he always won in incredible fashion with Lady. And once I saw that, like I made sure I talked to him as much as I could. I tried to pick his brain. I tried to use whatever I knew about the game, strategy, just how you work as a player. And I did my best to just create, a connection. And it worked. It literally worked. Now, I'll admit, I could have sold it harder because I remember Nick telling me, if you really want this guy, you gotta tell him, man. You gotta be one to tell him if you really want this guy. And that's what I did. And I wish I did that more often, honestly. I really wish I instilled that level of confidence all the time in the players that I was scouting, which I did eventually do after that situation. But I did need a little bit of a push because I was new to it. I was new to roster creation. And you know, this also was the same time I was running double trials. So I was doing a preliminary trials for an amateur team and then a secondary trials for academy. And this is where Fly Fam was born. And I'll be honest, oh boy, I made some mistakes on this, and which is hilarious when I think about it, because I remember thinking to myself, like, why would they go with this roster with like other amateur teams that LCS teams created? Because like to me it didn't make sense. But then when you're actually in the seat making the roster, I realized I repeated the same mistakes that some of these teams did. I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe I did that. And part of it, I'll say part of it is not necessarily my fault, but part of it is. Like when I think about that roster, I put a lot of trust that players would not repeat history in some ways, especially because it's been some years, and that fell apart. And that was something I learned with myself, is like sometimes I do give a little too much trust in an individual, and you just can't do that. Like sometimes you literally can't do that. And you need to know the trust that you're giving is like a certainty, in some ways, especially like when you're making these decisions. And naturally, there was some stuff that happened with the roster, which I'm not going to go into detail because it's not for me to say, but that resulted in some players falling through that I would say made me less confident in the roster as well. And even though it was like, I wish it was better, because like I was really excited about like having an amateur team, having a secondary team, and like growing through that. And when I look back at it, I'm thinking maybe we should not have even done like having that secondary team like competing with the rest. Maybe it would have been better having them in the OQs and like trialing them that way, which is a lot less threatening, less pressure. You can kind of like test like people around better in that way. And I think that's like also part of the thing I wish like I did in the end versus this other thing. But honestly, I was still kind of happy from the learning experience, and I was happy that like Brandini was the coach for them, and I got to work with him and talk to him about the squad, and I think he did really well with the squad for what he had to deal with. I thought he did really well, and Lunacia was on that squad as well. That kid was honestly killing it for the first half of the split. I wish he had the finishing power to kind of like push through towards the end, but he was a legit prospect. Like honestly, like by the end of the split, whether the good and bad, honestly, he was actually a pretty legit prospect that just needed the right roster like warped around him. And yeah, that would have been. I wish that was the case. I really wish I did it better around him because I think he deserved a better shot. A better shot, let's say that. Um, but yeah, my lessons, like I said, I can definitely spot talent. Like for sure, I can spot talent and get this done ahead of time. And then also, like I said, just don't give so much trust. Now, going from here, I thought he'd find a more permanent spot. Yeah, I thought so too. He ended up joining like what was it? It was like Fish Team Fish Tacos or something. I don't remember who was on that squad, but it also was not like the best squad either. And he's one of those players who just he needs a lot of attention. Like he just needs someone on his ass to make sure he's doing the right things, stuff like that. And I doubt that was probably the case when he was on that team, so didn't come out as well. So, what does a scout even do? So I made it as my own decision when going about this, and keep in mind, Nick and me kind of set up how we wanted to do scouting going into the year. At least what we should like focus on. How should we evaluate players? We worked on both on that. And then a lot of the just like watching players and just figuring all that rest of that stuff out was on me. And there was not a lot of structure to it, to be honest. Like in terms of it's not like we had like multiple people watching players all the time and be able to discuss them in that kind of case. It was just me. And so I decided knowing that if FlyQuest was not going to be the kind of team that has like a ton of money, not a lot of funding, you're not going to get like top of the spot LCK players. Like, there's no point on me watching these players if we're just not going to ever be able to get them. Same case, like you're not going to really probably be able to get the top of the line like LEC players. So I decided to watch like all the ERLs and the Challengers League for LCK. That's what I try to do. Yo, what's up, Panero? So I chose to do that because I thought to myself, surely this is just the better way to go about it, right? Like, if I do this, then these are guys we can actually pick up, use, and they'll be cheap, right? So I would say I would wake up at like, I don't know, like 7 a.m. or something, and it would literally be like 10 hours of just watching them. Like 10 hours of writing down notes for each player. And the way I broke this down, also I need to drink some water because I've been talking a lot. So the way I did this was, and I think this is the best way to go about it, especially if you don't have a lot of experience in the league, is the first thing you need to do is look up the stats of the players in the league. Like you need to see who has been forming, who has like, whatever, like good farm, good damage, good gold gain, like whatever you can think of, right? Like you need to get a basic idea on, and also look at their champ pools, right? Whatever. You get a basic idea on who you like in the first place. Because you can't just go into every game and just be like, wow, this guy did this thing, he must be good. Like, no. I need to like have a history first in my mind before even starting this. And so that's what I did with each league, whether it's like, the LFL, LVP, PRM, whatever the case is, right? The Ultra Liga. I did that with all these leagues. And so once I had that preliminary list in my head, then I'd watch the games. And I'd watch 3 games per player. Like three games per team, right? And so then you mark who stands out, right? Who to avoid, like, oh, okay, this guy's been in the league for 6 years. He's not even playing that well. His stats suck. Like, I'm just gonna mark him to avoid him. And if I watch this team later on, and for whatever the case he's doing well, awesome. Maybe I'll revisit it. But in that moment, you need to make a decision because if you're working as an individual, one scout, how the hell am I gonna cover like 10 plus leagues on my own? It's impossible. So you have to be pretty smart about your time usage, right? So that's how I went about it. And you'd make your detailed notes on each player, whether like through different points through the year. I always try to make it so it's like about 3 different points in the year because obviously, a player might have a really good start to the spring. Maybe he sucks in like spring playoffs, but then just because he sucked in spring playoffs doesn't mean he's just a terrible player. And then of course, then he has the summer season as well to play. So you have to find a balance, right? You need to actually like give him a real shot because if I see a guy who just sucks in summer playoffs and that's all I base it on, which a lot of people do, what does that mean? Maybe this is a bad meta. Did you see him in a different meta? Like, it actually matters. And of course, I had a rating system on various different aspects for the players. There was obviously early game metrics, mid late metrics, laning metrics, team fighting metrics, and because what was it? At this point, I believe I was watching all these games through replays, not on YouTube. I was watching all these through replays and just like actually getting to see everything happen. So I felt like my notes were actually pretty damn good and on like spot on compared to like people who can only watch on YouTube. And then, you create a roster list at the end, you know, based on how they performed, right? And I remember by the end of each split, I had assessed over 100 players doing this. And yeah, it was it was a lot more than I actually thought I did by the time I finished it. And this was in the case of that I did not ask anyone what their thoughts were on these players. These were my own individual thoughts on who I thought was good or bad. And looking back and seeing like some of the guys, like for instance, Jackie's, like I rated that guy over the other two the other two major mid laners that people liked, 610 and Vladdy. And he didn't go as far into the EUM Masters either. And that was one of the players I was actually super interested in and wanted to talk about going into the off season. I remember that. Of course, naturally didn't happen, but the fact that he got picked up by a team and he actually did rather well, like in the LAC, shit, that felt super good. I'm not gonna lie, it felt really good knowing that like what I was looking at and what I did on my own actually worked. Now, this, by the way, is just looking at leagues like professional games. There's a whole other aspect of doing this, which a lot of people think it's actually insane that I would even do it in the first place, but it's solo queue diving, and specifically NA solo queue diving. And pretty much, I mean, you just look on the leaderboard and you just find players you like and the champ pools they like that they do. So like if you like their champ pool, and then whatever the case is, you like their rating or whatever, you add them and you just see what happens. That's literally what I did. It was really meticulous. Like, it was just a lot of work. It really was. It was just a lot of work to just add, add, like constantly different players. And I know some of the players I added way back then are actually some players that people are interested in now, which is hilarious to me because I'm like, wow, like I was actually well ahead of these guys as well again because like I was actually like just diving into it and just doing the work versus waiting for someone to give me like a list of guys they like. And I would always ask them the same questions. What is your aspirations for Pro League? When did you start playing? Why did you start playing? Maybe like I asked some very specific things about their role. Like where are you based? Because keep in mind, back then, and it might be the case still now, but maybe not so much because people are more like remote. But if you need to get a visa, being in Canada actually matters. So, and also specifically if you're going to be remote, and you're going to play on LA server at that time, being in Vancouver was far better than being in like Toronto. Now, naturally, now being in Toronto is better than being in Vancouver because everyone plays in Chicago server. But like I said, at that time, if your team had LA preference server, that prioritized over Chicago. So this actually mattered. Backgrounds in sports. This was really important. You need to know if they played sports. Like, I cannot tell you how many guys there are that who just never played sports and did anything like that. And then you go into playing, video games professionally, you don't really understand the team environment the same way as these other guys. And so there's a learning experience on that alone. And of course, if your learning experience is through online team play versus like on site, that also can cause issues. And of course, this is a question that people hate asking, like, how old are you? But it does actually matter because to me, specifically for me, knowing their age and more specifically knowing how many years they've played League, that is the probably more important one. Because if you're 22 years old but you've only played for 1 year, I don't give a shit. That's fine. Like you're new. You're new to the game. That's not an issue at all. But if you're like 24 and you've played for like let's say like 6 years already, like that will actually matter. Like that does actually matter. And also keep in mind just your maturity. Like 16-year-old kids, like you're not very mature. Some are more mature than others, some act more mature, but you're not really that mature, so that actually does matter. And there was the best example I can use is Venyor. If anyone knows who Venyor is, when I looked at him at first, I think he was like 21. I want to say he's like 21 or 22 at that time. And people would naturally say like, "Oh man, he's already 21 years old in esports. Holy shit!" But like, he only had like half a split in it. He was barely playing the game at that point. Like, why do I care? It's not like he's been playing for 6 years or something. He's only been playing for half a split. And I watch him, I was like, holy shit, this guy's actually pretty damn good. Like, he actually plays like side lane well. He knows how to actually deep push and move when necessary. He knows how to play his lane well. That's my biggest issue with scouting with players, or with people who do scout. I think some of them get too attached towards how old they are and just how old they are. Like if they don't say that they're under 20 years old, they think this person is useless. No point. Oh, you're 22? God, even if you've never played League before, I don't care. I don't want you. You're already 22. You probably got like 1 year left in you. Like, are you kidding me? That's not how this works at all. What kind of thinking is that? My God, if that's the case, then you might as well just open a list of Leaguepedia and choose only the 18-year-old kids and just look at them and that's it. Terrible, terrible way to scout. So building rosters, right? You know, there's actually something I've grown to hate. I'll be honest. Is it something I've actually grown to hate? It's the quiet guy. Like, I'm not gonna lie, guys. It's not bad, but it's just the player who doesn't really provide a lot of effort, talking in game, giving strategy, being involved in pick and ban, just even talking review. Like you're kind of just like a third party outsider. And a lot of the players like this, if you do pick them up, are typically guys who you're ensuring are gonna be like just outplaying their opponents, right? Like they're gonna outplay your opponents in fights, whatever, and that's like why they're good, right? And of course, naturally, other people have to pick up their slack, or you need to like kind of build around it to like deal with it. And it's okay, but if you can't get through them, and it does matter, by the way, like long term, this does need to be correct. Like you actually can't be the kind of guy who just doesn't say anything ever. Now, I don't know if Sunday is like that because people always said he's kind of quiet. I do remember watching some 100 Thieves games, and he actually would ping all the time. Um, would I be okay with ADC just being quiet if they have a support willing to talk? So, yes and no. I think again, I firmly believe that every player should be able to communicate strategy and how they see things because in the end of the day, you're gonna see stuff that your support does not see. You know what I mean? Like because you're so keen on improving your mechanics and your fighting capabilities, your support might not be the same. So while your support might see an option, to you, you might be like, dude, that's a terrible play for me. So don't do that. And you have to speak up, right? And to me, long term, you have to improve it. Initially, it's okay. And a lot of people will say, like, it's okay for the ADC to actually be the guy who doesn't talk a lot. I would say how would I say this? I would say probably just generally being quiet, like silent. Because there's people who literally won't say anything, but if you're the guy who's like, oh, I can stack a wave to dive. Oh, we can use this wave for a dragon. Oh, I can freeze this wave, or I'm going to base here. Very simple things. That at least is something. I'm talking about people who like almost don't say anything. And that is just not really acceptable in the end of the day, right? It's just not acceptable. So I've had definitely plenty of like players and rosters where this was the case. And it's just hard. I don't know. It's just really hard because like it's unfortunately there's just situations that pop up in the game that they cannot, like, let's say this. There will be situations where they will literally outplay their opponent in lane and create a situation that will be checkmate, and no one else knows it's checkmate because they did not say it. Like, so basically they won and did everything they could to make the situation the best it could be, and then you have no idea how to exploit it as a team because they didn't speak up. That is where I have issues with. Um, Now, of course, I don't think this is the case that, like, you're gonna avoid every quiet person ever, right? Like, I don't think that's the case, but I don't know. I've been stung a little bit for like going this route at times, and it's something I try to avoid a bit these days. Of course, I'm not really doing any like roster building anymore, but from my time doing it, that's how I felt. Now, there's also the balance between like intensity and then being like and melody, being like calm, and you can't have five guys who are just like super intense all the time, right? I mean, like it can work. It'll be a shit show to say that for sure. You need a guy at the helm who can really handle it. Uh, but I think every team just needs a really nice mix of guys, and I don't think that's actually really thought too much. I think when you look at roster building, I think a lot of people just see who is really good. Like, does this mesh their play style? But the personality aspect is not so envisioned on how that's gonna work. Like, I think having a jokester on the team is amazing. I think Alex like Sharks told me that every team should have a jokester. Because at the end of the day, he just like kind of breaks everyone down. If things are feeling too intense, he can break everyone down and snap them out of it. If I think of a jokester on a team, I think of like Broken Blade on G2. Like he seems like the type of person who's able to do that. Um, I think some of the academy rosters I had did not have someone like that who could actually do that. And the coaches were not really the type to do that either. And of course, that's a whole other like, thing where if you have a coach who can do some of these parts to fill it in, to fill that gap in, that's great. That's really amazing. Sometimes a team needs someone who's like very strategic to kind of deal with the intense players. Like you can kind of checkmate the intense players through like better strategy talk, knowledge of the game, and so that like puts a handle on it. But then of course there's gonna be other situations where you need to dig deeper, and then those guys can't handle it. So that's why we don't really have anyone I would say in esports that I can think of, at least on the top of my head, that fits both parts as a coach. Like someone who's very good and detailed about the game, but then also can really handle like the personality side as well. Maybe it's Coma. Like I don't know. Like like we don't really know as much in detail about how coaches are, but yeah, it's kind of how it is. So like for right now, like if you look at TL, like they have Spawn. And so naturally, I assume Spawn is that kind of guy who handles the personalities and like brings structure to the team. And then you have Rainover who can like go deeper into the game to handle other parts. And that's amazing. Great. And for players, like I said, I've had teams where like there's a player who's really intense, and you have a guy who's kind of timid, kind of shy, and his best environment is like where like everyone's like kind of happy go lucky in some ways. No one's like too overly intense, or else like it kind of freaks them out. And so I've been on teams like multiple times, actually multiple LCS teams, where there was a player who was too intense for another, and that player could not handle it, and it just absolutely destroyed them. So like that happens. And even if the team is really good, like the team is super fucking good on paper, right? And everything, you just can't get past that one part. Now, at the same time, like I said, you do need someone who like put fire under your belly and like actually get the team like ready to play as well. Like you can't have everyone just be relaxed. I need someone who actually adds some intensity at times because it's necessary. You need that. So I think this is like a big thing with rosters. I don't know how many people have actually figured this one out yet, but this will always be a huge issue and hurdle for every team. Now, going into this thing, the final straw, guys. talking about all the stuff I loved about FlyQuest, scouting, all that stuff. I really loved my time on that team. 4 years, it was amazing. You know, it really was really, really amazing. Everyone was like really happy to always talk to each other, like very open to talk to each other. I remember like running interviews and then we picked up Sam Hine as our data analyst, and that guy was so damn good at his job, and he fit the bill exactly for like the personalities on like the staff side, and that was so fun having like just adding more people like that are like you and who like want to build something great. And yeah, I don't know. Those 4 years on Flack was definitely easily my favorite 4 years working in esports. Easily. Um, but unfortunately for me, after all that time being on there, and this is the like I said, I call this the final straw because this was my final lesson going from all this was that I gave it my all. I put myself in a lot of different aspects of the like on this organization, the team that I definitely did not have to do, but I did it because I liked the team and I loved working with them. And there was definitely some struggles within the team, it felt like, going into that final year, the 2023 year. Some ways it felt like politics. I don't know. Like, I never really gave a shit about politics. I'm really happy that esports can avoid this at times because, like, you just want to focus on your work, right? Like, you just want to focus on getting better, and that's it. But unfortunately, this will intervene because some people like politics more so than the actual, building something great per se. And that off season, like I said, I had over 100 different players scouted out. I felt ready. I felt ready for the off season based on how we're doing. Even with Nick Fan being let go, and I was pretty worried about that because to me, I'm like, if Nick Fan's gone and people view me as the right hand of Nick Fan, I'm probably next online, right? But I still had faith. Like, okay, but like I've done good work for the team. I've been with them for 4 years. Surely nothing like will bad happen. But there was just nothing. There was no noise. Nothing was happening. Like I wasn't being talked to about off-season stuff or anything like that. And that made me thinking like maybe there's something that's really gonna happen. Like maybe I actually am gonna get fired or something like that. And that was a terrible month. It was such a terrible month of just not knowing what's gonna happen. I hated that so much, just not knowing what's gonna happen. And then, you know, we picked up Andrew, and I was actually excited. You know, I've heard some things. I'll admit, like when you've been in the scene, you'll hear some things through the grapevines about different people and whatever. But you know, I believe that this was going to be a good idea because I knew that him and Empire and like Peter Dunn and whatever like built a pretty. I'm pretty sure they built a scouting system there. So I was pretty excited about that. I was like, holy shit! I bet I can learn something from this guy and improve my craft, and this is gonna be awesome. It was not awesome. it was not awesome. Um, from how it went and everything, I remember being told that like, well, I figured out that like it was just gonna be me and the academy analyst who had to be talked to about something. I don't know. Now, keep in mind, leading up to all this, I was kind of asking questions in a way about like work for me to do in some ways to like poke around. It's like, oh, so like we're talking next week about like what we're gonna do for scouting, what we're gonna do for roster creation, because like I'm trying to like figure out like am I on this team still? Like what's going on? And I got like maybes. It seemed like a maybe to me. It sounded like yeah, maybe yeah. It was not a maybe or yeah, it was a no. It was definitely a big no. I'm not gonna go into detail about that exit interview, but I'll just say this for sure. It was horrible. It was just that is not how you fire someone at all. That is not how you go about it. Um, like, does anyone know the scene in Moneyball with the GM talking to the assistant GM about what you need to do when it comes to firing someone? I'd rather take a bullet to the head than 5 to the chest. I took 5 to the chest. Like That was crazy to me. That's how it went down. 4 years, and that's how it went down. And I remember doing my post about leaving FlyQuest, and no one at the leadership on FlyQuest, or was still in leadership, replied, liked, retweeted, or anything with it. No one interacted with it. The only people who did were either gone or people who I actually liked. And that was crazy to me. This was the complete opposite of what FlyQuest was. I mean, 2016 Immortals did better. And that was like ages ago. Like 2016, I had Dylan Falco, like promoting and helping me out, But I can't even get it from my own damn bosses. Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, not even the FlyQuest organization, like Twitter would even retweet it or anything. So my thanks was for finding the Masu, like their big prime talent, or LCS, who is obviously doing incredible right now, and is definitely going to be there for a long time, I assume. I assume at this point. And the thanks I got was none. None. Just none. Just couldn't believe it. And that broke me. That actually broke me. I'm not gonna lie. It really broke me. And even now, I still have issues like thinking about it. Like, I just couldn't believe it. And I think what was even worse to me was like, I felt like I was preparing that whole year to do the work. Like I said, like I scouted a ton of players. I was so excited. Even if, I'll be honest, even if I was let go after the off season, I actually would have been okay with that, because at least I got to use what I did. All that shit I did that whole year, wasted. Absolutely useless. And I knew that they had, like, for the way like it was done, I know that the team wasted money probably on like other people that was just like not necessary. But then I'm not worth like whatever I was worth. And to be honest, I'll tell you right now, I wasn't really making a ton of money still, but like I was definitely making less than market value from what I was told when I initially asked about like how much does like a head of scouting even make, and I was making less than that, and I wasn't worth that. So after that point, I was just like done, absolutely done with the organization and putting my trust in the team, which sucks. Because I'm the type. I don't know if anyone remembers Yamato Cannon, like what he. Why do I say Yamato Cannon? Just I think it's just Yamato, right? What Yamato, like the coach, like wanted to do. He wanted to put his trust in an organization for years. He wants to be there for years, and that's how I am too. I want to invest my time for years and meddle in everything I can to help that team get better, because that feels good. I don't want to be the type of person who's just thinking about the dollar and the politics and just it's just that sucks. I don't want to think about that. So I'll be honest. This kind of just changed my mindset on how I viewed working with teams, and that led to the final season, the Immortals' last ride. So Immortals, they were just looking for someone for part time. You know, it was fun. Honestly, it was fun working at LCS again. Going from someone who worked in academy for all those years and then working in LCS, I actually, I'll be honest, the amount of games I watched in 2023 as a head of scouting really helped me in 2024, like this year. And I wasn't watching major league games as much. I was watching a lot of ERLs and stuff, and you can still learn a ton watching those games, those players. So I felt like that really benefited me a lot towards working LCS. And again, I actually felt pretty good working at LCS again. Now, keep in mind, like I said, it's part time. So I'm just doing like your scouting presentations, patch notes, giving some feedback in scrims. But I really wanted to dive deeper. Like, I really wanted to invest myself more. But I knew from my experience with FlyQuest that I just don't want to do that anymore. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to get burned again. I don't want a team to just like screw me over. Like I couldn't take that. My heart literally could not take that. So it was fun working for these guys. it was a chill environment. It was nice working with a Nero. Like he would give me feedback when I talked in scrims, and that was great. Like honestly, I don't think I really had too many coaches where I would say something in the coach chat about something happening in scrims or like a game and respond back on either like something they agree on or maybe they disagree on it and why they disagree on it. So working with a Narrow was actually really nice in that case. Joey was really easy to work with. But I didn't interact as much with the players because again, I'm part time. I don't really want to. If I'm not all in, I don't want to like muddy up what's happening. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to make things worse or like tell someone something else that they shouldn't know. So I stuck with that. Um, and now also, I'm working for Maryville slash Dragonsteel, and all I'm gonna say, guys, is it's amazing. Like for me, this actually reminds me of the good times with FlyQuest. Like I'm really liking working with the players, with Niles. It's great talking with Clerky, and honestly, I can't wait to do more on the team with the school, whatever. Like I actually really like it a lot. So going from that horrible situation with FlyQuest and the ending to then working on, just doing having some fun in LCS, and then also getting onto like an organization like this, where things remind me of the good old days. Yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. So this kind of sums up my career in a way. Working through, I mean, working through LCS orgs, working through like the academy side, like the scouting side, roster building, and like the number one thing I can really say after doing all this is honestly just you really just got to find the right guys, man. You got to really find the right leadership because I think the money is not good enough. Like the money is clearly not good enough unless you have like a for sure thing in, like unless you're like a head coach or maybe you're working on like the business staff side who get paid better than coach like some of the other coaches and analysts. Uh, like then that's probably something else. But if you're not on that side, while it's like fun to do this and it can be like a dream job and everything, yeah, it's really volatile. And it's like yeah, it's really volatile and you're probably just better off doing something else in many ways. Like I said, if you don't find that team that's really going to commit to you, in the end of the day, it's just, I don't know, it just sucks. I don't know, it really just sucks, and you're not getting paid a lot either. So that is pretty rough. That's pretty rough in the end of the day. For me, I can say I'm fortunate enough to have some support. Especially starting out. Like my parents were like, I wouldn't say my parents were really fully supportive, but I at least got to live in the house and like I didn't have like really many bills or anything like that. So it was pretty nice for me to try to go for this. Whereas for other people, it's definitely way harder and definitely not worthwhile to do it. And yes, yeah, the team that had PoE, Santorin, Wild Turtle, Ignar, that squad was 2020. So that was the first year I was on FlyQuest, but I was fully on the academy side. So I didn't really have anything to do with that squad. But the fact that I joined the squad when that team made such a huge run was very exciting, very fun. To be honest, it was very fun and exciting. Um, but yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. That's my career in a nutshell. I don't know if I'm gonna keep doing LCS to be honest, going into next year. Like, sure, maybe I'll look for something, but unless it's like actually worthwhile, I don't see the point. I'm married. I really like working with Dragonsteel. I like Maryville as a whole, and with that and doing LCS at the same time might not be the easiest unless it's like part time or something like that. And LCS teams don't really branch off their staff too much, at least on the remote side. And like I said, it's kind of like data analyst and coaches. Like I'm more of an old school individual in the work I do. So that's not really as common on having someone like that on the team. So I don't know if something will be open or not, but for now, if this is it, if this is my last year working LCS, I'm okay with it. It's been fun. You know, it probably will be, honestly, when I think about it, it probably will be just on how teams are gonna turn out, but it's been fun. And I'll still do stuff in the league space, but it will not be it probably will not be being so direct as it is now.